Hey man, let's break one of the most uncomfortable truths that most men never figure out until they've already been crushed by it. Women don't actually want you to take them seriously, not in the way you think. You keep treating her like every word out of her mouth is gospel, like every emotion she feels must be honored as absolute truth, like every promise she makes has the weight of stone. But here's the reality. Her words are reflections of the moment. Her feelings are weather patterns. Her promises are bound by her emotional state, not by logic or permanence. When you take all of that too seriously, when you hang on every syllable like it's scripture, you set yourself up to be destroyed. Because in her world, what she says on Monday night might not be what she believes on Friday morning. She isn't lying, she's just fluid. But when you treat her emotional fluidity as absolute, you're building a castle on sand, and when the tide comes in, you're left standing there wondering why everything collapsed around you. Most men mistake seriousness for respect. They think if they take every emotional fluctuation she has as something to be solved, every complaint as a problem to be fixed, every mood as a signal of danger, then they're proving themselves to be good partners. But all that does is drown them in her chaos. Women don't want a man who scrambles every time she's upset. They don't want a man who becomes her emotional sponge, soaking up every storm she creates. What they actually crave is a man who can smile at her contradictions without being shaken, who can stand steady while she blows hot and cold, who can laugh at her dramatics instead of bowing down to them. Because when you take her too seriously, you become predictable, you become reactive. And a man who reacts to everything she says or does is a man she can control. Control kills attraction, and attraction dies the second she realizes she can move you like a puppet. Think about it. How many times have you heard a woman say one thing with passion and certainty, only to completely contradict it a week later? She'll say, "I just want a nice guy who treats me right," then ignore the man who does exactly that while chasing the one who ignores her. She'll say, "I hate drama," then stir chaos in every relationship she enters. She'll say, "I just want stability," then get bored the moment she finds it. If you take all of this seriously, you'll think she's a liar, a hypocrite, or worse. But the truth is simpler. She isn't trying to be consistent. She's trying to feel something, and her words are just a reflection of her feelings in the moment. The mistake men make is assuming her words equal her reality. They don't. Her reality is what she feels right now. And if you treat that like unshakable law, you'll end up chasing an ever-changing target until you collapse from exhaustion. Here's where it gets deeper. Women test men by shifting stories. They don't even know they're doing it half the time. She'll tell you she wants one thing, then change it the next day. Not because she's cruel, but because she's wired to see if you'll stay grounded when her emotions don't. If you take her every word as gospel, you'll fail that test every time, because she doesn't actually want you to rearrange your world every time she changes her mind. What she really wants is to feel your solidity when she's spinning, to feel your groundedness when she's floating, to feel your leadership when she's lost in the storm. That's why she doesn't want you to take her seriously, because if you do, you'll be tossed around like a leaf in the wind. What she wants, deep down, is for you to stand so firm that her chaos breaks against you instead of through you. And this is why the men who never seem to struggle with women are the ones who don't take them too seriously. They don't argue over every contradiction. They don't cling to every word. They don't panic when she's hot today and cold tomorrow. They smile, they tease, they shrug, they keep moving forward. And guess what? Those are the men women obsess over, not because they're dismissive or disrespectful, but because they refuse to get trapped in her emotional theater. They don't attend every show. They don't clap for every performance. They remain the audience of one who only applauds when something truly matters, and that balance drives her wild. Because women don't fall in love with men they can't quite pin down. And if you learn this truth, that she doesn't want to be taken seriously, she wants to be felt, led, and steadied, you'll stop being confused, you'll stop being drained, and you'll finally start to win this game. The moment you stop taking women too seriously, you begin to see the world they actually live in. You'll notice how quickly they shift between moods, how fast their stories change, and how easily they justify contradictions. And instead of feeling angry or betrayed by it, you'll start to see it for what it is, the way they're wired. Women live in a reality shaped more by emotion than by logic. When you finally stop expecting them to think, act, or respond like men, you stop being disappointed. You stop wasting energy trying to hold them to a standard they were never built to uphold. And ironically, the less serious you take their emotional swings, the more respect they'll have for you, because you've proven you can handle their storms without sinking. That's what separates leaders from followers. One laughs at the waves, the other drowns in them. But here's the trap. Men confuse not taking women seriously with not valuing them. And that's not what this is about. This isn't about treating her like she doesn't matter. It's about understanding that what she feels isn't always what she means. It's about recognizing that when she says she hates you in anger, it doesn't mean the love is gone. When she says she's done forever, it doesn't mean she won't be back tomorrow. If you take those words seriously, you'll either panic and overreact, or you'll harden and shut down completely. Both destroy relationships. But if you understand that her words are emotional, not permanent, you don't panic, you don't react. You just let her ride out her storm while you stay grounded. And that groundedness, that's what builds attraction. That's what makes her look at you differently than every other man who loses himself in her emotions. Ask yourself this: why do women flock to the men who tease them, joke with them, and never seem fully invested in their dramatics? It's because those men are not weighed down by her contradictions. They can laugh when she's being dramatic. They can smirk when she's testing them. They can roll with the unpredictability instead of breaking under it, and that energy is intoxicating to women. They don't want you to treat their every word as a decree. They want you to filter it through strength. They want you to hear their chaos, but respond with calm. That's why women are drawn to playful, nonchalant men, because those men prove, without saying a word, that they cannot be controlled. A man who doesn't take her emotional theater too seriously shows her that he's solid. And solid men are irresistible. Now here's the irony. When you stop taking women so seriously, you actually end up giving them what they secretly crave: freedom. Freedom to express emotions without being smothered by your panic. Freedom to vent without you turning it into a courtroom debate. Freedom to contradict themselves without you holding it against them like evidence. Because when you take her words too seriously, you imprison her in a cage of accountability she wasn't built to live in. But when you let her flow, when you allow her to express without trying to nail her to a wall of logic, she feels safe. And when she feels safe, she trusts you. And when she trusts you, she values you. This is the paradox. Women test your strength by throwing emotional chaos at you, but they love you more when you show them it can't break you. So what happens when you take her too seriously? You suffocate the relationship. You turn into the man who overanalyzes every text, every silence, every contradiction, and you drain yourself trying to solve her. That's when she starts losing attraction. Because women don't fall for men who put them under a microscope. They fall for men who let them be emotional while never losing their own frame. If you remember this truth, you'll stop playing the fool who panics every time her mood shifts. You'll stop being the man who thinks her words are permanent. Instead, you'll be the man who sees through the chaos, who laughs when others would crumble, who leads instead of reacts. And that, brother, is why women don't actually want you to take them seriously. Because when you stop doing that, you finally become the man she can trust to handle her storms without drowning in them. The men who struggle most with women are the ones who are too serious. They cling to every word she says like it's a legal contract, and then they get blindsided when she changes her mind. But here's the reality. You can't hold women to the standards of consistency you hold yourself to. Men are built on logic, women are built on emotion. And when you mix those two worlds, chaos happens if you don't understand the difference. That's why so many men end up feeling betrayed, manipulated, or played. They think she lied when really she just changed her feelings. They think she's disloyal when really she just couldn't sustain the fantasy she built in her head. If you take all of that seriously, you'll spend your life hurt and bitter. But when you understand the game, when you stop taking her shifting emotions as permanent truths, you free yourself. You stop being the fool, chasing consistency in a world that thrives on contradiction. Women want to feel, not to be analyzed. When you take them seriously, you try to box them into logic, and it suffocates them. That's why you'll hear women say things like, "You just don't understand me." What they mean is, you're treating my emotions like facts, instead of letting me flow through them. The men who succeed with women are the ones who know how to let her talk, let her express, let her contradict herself, without trying to solve it. They nod, they smile, they maybe even tease her a little, and then they move on. That freedom makes her feel heard without making her feel trapped. That's why she keeps coming back to men who don't take her too seriously. They give her the space to be emotional without trying to nail her down to a permanent truth she doesn't even live by. This is why the phrase "don't listen to what she says, watch what she does" is so critical. Because words are fleeting, actions reveal truth. A woman can say she wants stability while chasing chaos. She can say she wants commitment while keeping options open. She can say she wants honesty while hiding her own secrets. If you take her seriously, you'll be blinded by the words. But if you stay grounded and watch her patterns, you'll see the truth. And women respect the men who see truth over words. They may test you, they may throw smoke screens, they may contradict themselves, but deep down, they admire the man who doesn't get lost in their illusions. That's why you must stop treating her words like laws. They're just weather reports. Sometimes sunny, sometimes stormy, always changing. The climate is what matters, not the daily forecast. Another reason you can't take women seriously is because seriousness kills attraction. Think about the men she chases. Are they heavy, always emotional, always debating her words, or are they light, playful, teasing, mysterious? It's the second type every single time. Because attraction doesn't thrive in seriousness, it thrives in polarity. When she's being dramatic, you being playful is what creates the spark. When she's chaotic, you being calm is what balances her. When she's emotional, you being logical without being cold is what stabilizes her. But if you take her every mood as a personal attack, if you treat every contradiction like betrayal, you suffocate the polarity. She stops feeling attraction because she feels like she's dating a mirror of her own chaos instead of a man who can contain it. That's why seriousness isn't strength, it's weakness disguised as care. Here's the raw truth. Women don't even take themselves as seriously as men take them. They'll say something with passion, then laugh at themselves later. They'll make a dramatic declaration, then pretend it never happened. They'll swear they hate you, then call you an hour later, like nothing was wrong. They live in an emotional loop, and they don't expect permanence from themselves. But men, because we're wired for consistency, think everything has to be solid, fixed, permanent. That mismatch is why men suffer so much in relationships, because they try to anchor themselves to a moving tide. But when you stop doing that, when you stop taking her seriously, when you treat her words and moods like waves that come and go, you find peace. You stop being pulled under. You start surfing the wave instead of drowning in it, and that's when you finally understand how to love a woman without losing yourself. The deeper you go into this truth, the more you realize that taking a woman seriously is one of the fastest ways to lose her attraction. When you treat her like a professor lecturing facts, you strip the relationship of its playfulness, its spark, its mystery. She doesn't want you fact-checking her feelings. She doesn't want you debating her contradictions like you're in a courtroom. She doesn't want you panicking when she says things in anger or impulse. What she really wants is for you to smile, to smirk, to let it roll off your shoulders while you continue leading. Because here's the reality, her chaos is her nature, but your groundedness is your role. And when you take her too seriously, you're stepping out of your role and into hers. That's when the polarity collapses. That's when she loses respect. And when respect goes, attraction dies with it. Look at the men she obsesses over. They're not the ones who sit there writing essays over text to prove a point. They're not the ones who get wounded by every sharp word she throws. They're the ones who brush it off with humor, the ones who walk away instead of debating, the ones who never let her storms define their energy. These men know something most guys don't. Women don't want to be taken literally, they want to be felt emotionally. That's why the same words coming out of your mouth bore her, but coming from a man with playful energy excite her. It's not the words, it's the energy behind them. And when you stop taking her seriously, when you stop clinging to her contradictions, you finally free yourself to bring that playful, magnetic energy that keeps her hooked. Here's another brutal truth. When you take women too seriously, you give away all your power. Every time you react to her moods, every time you overanalyze her words, every time you let her contradictions drive you insane, you're telling her, you control me. And once she knows she can control you, it's over. She'll lose respect instantly. Because women crave men who lead. not men who can be puppeteered by emotions. When you stop taking her so seriously, you take that power back. You send a message that says, your chaos does not shake me, your moods do not define me, your contradictions do not move me from my frame. And that, right there, is what women secretly want. They don't want to be taken seriously. They want to feel the power of a man who can handle them without folding. This is why the strongest relationships are not built on men trying to decode women like math problems. They're built on men who accept the contradictions, who expect the mood swings, who anticipate the drama, and remain unshaken through it all. It's not about arguing her into logic, it's about letting her live in her emotional world while you remain rooted in reality. When she's crying over something that makes no sense, you don't debate, you comfort, or you give space. When she's angry over a fantasy she created in her head, you don't defend, you let her burn it out. When she contradicts herself, you don't keep score, you let it pass. And every time you do, you show her you're different. You're not like the men who panic, who fold, who argue, who take her every word as law. You're the man who remains steady, calm, grounded. And that's the man she can't stop thinking about. So here's the real lesson. Women don't want you to take them seriously because they don't take themselves that seriously. They live in a fluid reality where words shift, emotions rule, and feelings change like seasons. If you anchor yourself to every word, you'll break. If you argue with every contradiction, you'll drown. But if you learn to ride the wave, if you learn to laugh when others panic, if you learn to see her chaos as part of her nature instead of an attack on your stability, you win. You stop being the man who's confused, drained, and bitter. You become the man who's calm, confident, unshakable. And that's when women respect you more than anyone else, because you've proven you're not just another man trapped in her storm. You're the rock she crashes against. And that, brother, is real masculine strength. Once you finally stop taking women too seriously, everything about the way you interact with them changes. You no longer get thrown off when she pulls away, you no longer panic when her mood shifts, and you no longer waste your breath debating her contradictions. Instead, you sit back with calm confidence, knowing her emotions are a tide, not a verdict. You let her flow, you let her storm, you let her contradict herself, and you stand steady through it all. And what happens? She starts seeing you differently. While other men crumble at her tests, you pass them by, not even engaging in the game, and that's when the attraction flips. That's when she starts respecting you again, because she realizes you are not a man who bends to her illusions. You are a man who holds reality steady while she dances through fantasy. This is also why women find humor so attractive, not just because it's fun, but because humor is proof that you don't take her, or the world, too seriously. When you can laugh at her dramatics, when you can smirk at her contradictions, when you can make light of situations that would make another man spiral, you're showing her strength. You're showing her that you don't live in fear of losing her approval, that you're not desperate to defend yourself, that you're not a prisoner of her moods, and that's why she keeps chasing men who don't bend to her seriousness. Not because they're better men, but because they radiate an energy that says, I cannot be broken by your chaos. And in a world where so many men fold under the weight of women's emotions, that energy is irresistible. But here's the final twist. When you stop taking women seriously, you actually start loving them more authentically, because you're no longer loving an illusion. You're no longer clinging to the idea that she'll always be consistent, always be logical, always be stable. You accept her as she is, emotional, chaotic, unpredictable, and you stop resenting her for it. And that acceptance is freedom. It frees her to be herself, and it frees you to remain yourself. That's why relationships led by men who don't take women too seriously often last longer, because the man isn't trying to force her into his world of logic. He's allowing her to live in her emotional world while he remains grounded in his. And when those two worlds coexist, that's when balance is found. The problem is that most men never learn this. They either worship women like goddesses or resent them like enemies. Both extremes come from the same mistake, taking them too seriously. But when you learn to laugh, to let go, to stop expecting her emotions to act like facts, you become untouchable. You stop being the man who's always confused, always hurt, always bitter. Instead, you become the man who flows through relationships with strength, who never loses himself, who never sacrifices his frame. And that's the kind of man women can't resist. Not because he's perfect, but because he's unshakable, and unshakable men are rare. So remember this truth, brother. Women don't want you to take them seriously. They don't want you analyzing their every word, worshipping their every mood, or folding under their every test. What they want is a man who sees through the chaos, who laughs at the contradictions, who remains calm when she's a storm. They want a man who doesn't panic, doesn't chase, doesn't beg, because those men are rare, and rarity is what women value most. So stop wasting your life trying to decode her emotions like equations. Stop treating her moods like verdicts. Stop chasing consistency in a world that thrives on contradiction. Stand tall, stay grounded, lead with strength, because the man who refuses to take her too seriously isn't dismissive. He's powerful. And in the end, that's the only type of man she'll ever truly respect, desire, and never forget.